All right. I want to talk a little bit today about some recent news that has been shared via SHRM, which is the Society for Human Resource Management, and essentially just how wrong they are when it comes to some of the decisions that they've made recently. So let's talk about it. And I've titled this short presentation simply SHRM is wrong because they are. So a couple of days ago, SHRM released a statement, and this is the statement that was taken from their LinkedIn page that talked a little bit about their transition from, diversity, equity, and inclusion to just inclusion and diversity. Their thought behind this was that they want to lead with inclusion. They want to drop equity. It will now be just a bullet point underneath inclusion. And they're doing this because of, the backlash that's happened and, polarization that they've outlined and things of that nature. And quite frankly, I don't think any of the reasons that they've listed are sufficient enough to change directions in the way that they have. And quite frankly, I think they're wrong. I think this statement really sets us back decades. And what I expect from an organization like SHRM is for them to be a leader, for them to continue pushing, HR practitioners, pushing organizations to do the next best thing. What's coming next that we need to be aware of, that we need to embrace, that we need to adopt. And instead, what it looks like is that they're caving to backlash. And instead of being a leader, they are a follower. And as someone who has been involved with SHRM for many years, I'm disappointed because this is not the direction that SHRM should be going in, much less telling other HR practitioners that they need to go in. So today I kind of want to talk about two things. I want to talk about how we cannot deprioritize equity. Like we have to include equity. It's diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that kind of brings me to my second thing is that we have to start with diversity. Like it makes zero sense to not start with diversity. It's the only logical thing to do. So this inclusion first philosophy and mindset doesn't work. And I'll talk a little bit about that. So first, what is equity? When we are thinking about equity just in general, you might find a definition like fairness or just in the dictionary. In a business context, equity means looking at the policies, the programs, the initiatives, the systems within the organization to determine, are those things fair, but also are the outcomes of those processes, programs, policies, are they fair? And so it takes a little bit of work, to be able to get to the point of equity. But I think this is where true transformational change comes. If you are able to look at your organization as a system, as a machine, then looking at each one of the parts to ensure that the overall machine is meeting the needs of everyone who's involved with your organization, it's kind of a must. So to de-emphasize equity, I think is a huge step backwards. But for HR practitioners to de-emphasize equity is detrimental. It really is detrimental. So how do we achieve equity? And before I answer this question, I kind of want to go back to my second point, because I think by answering that, it'll bring me back to this. Now, as long as I can remember, it's been diversity, equity, and inclusion. And when I first started doing this work, it was diversity and inclusion. And then equity was added, and then, belonging and justice and accessibility. There's been a whole lot of additions since then, but the core of it has always been diversity, equity, and inclusion. And to me, that makes sense. In that order: diversity, equity, and inclusion. You could do diversity, inclusion, and equity, but that acronym is not attractive. So diversity, equity, and inclusion. What I know for a fact is that it's not inclusion and diversity. You cannot lead with inclusion. You have to lead with diversity. Now, you can see the table of diversity. This is how I think about diversity. As I am facilitating conversations around diversity and intersectionality, this is what I mean. Now, most people, when they think about diversity, they may think about race, gender identity, sexual orientation, those sorts of things, maybe disability, maybe veteran status, but that's kind of the extent of it. When I think about diversity, I think about all of these different things plus more, but I also think about their intersections, right? Which makes diversity even more nuanced, but it's reality because we don't just identify with one of these things, we identify with all of them in a variety of combinations. And I think that is where most people fall short, because if you do not understand that and build a solid foundation on that principle and that philosophy, then everything else that you do is going to just be fall that much shorter. So when I think about building a solid foundation of diversity, then that leads us to inclusion. Inclusion is a set of behaviors. They are things that we can do for each other to make them feel like they belong. And what's really interesting here, and there's a number of analogies that I could use, but what I often think about is, I'm a parent, I have 2 kids, and they need different things from me, and that's okay. And I have a 4-year-old and I have a 2-year-old, and as I am learning more about them, I'm recognizing that they need different things, and I'm giving them different things. Based on their personality, they need different things. Based on their age, they need different things. Based on all sorts of things, they need me to show up differently for each of them at different times. And that's okay. If you're a parent, you can probably relate to that. You may have a group of friends, and each of your friends needs something different from you. I know I have some friends, when I call and they're sharing with me what they're going through, they just want me to listen. And then I have some friends, when I call, they share with me what they're going through, and they want me to provide them with the answer. And the things that I have to do to make sure they know that they mean something to me, that they're valuable, it's different based on their identity, their personality, their age, their relationship status, all of those different things matter. So it's difficult to have an inclusion first strategy when you do not have a solid foundation on diversity. If diversity is secondary to inclusion, then that means you're creating a one-size-fits-all strategy, hoping that it positively impacts all aspects of diversity. And that's just not how it works. Like, that just doesn't even make sense. We have to start with diversity, because by learning more about people, by learning more about their upbringing, their culture, their background, who they are, we then can create inclusion strategies that make sense, that meet people where they are. And that has been my biggest gripe with not only SHRM, but SHRM right now, but other organizations that say inclusion first, is that they are neglecting the fact that you have to know people before you can make them feel included. And I think that's going to be the biggest downfall for many of these organizations. And then lastly, it comes equity. And again, it has to be built on a solid foundation of diversity. Because if you understand people, if you understand their background, if you understand their history, their culture, their upbringing, if you understand all of those things, and it may be from a societal perspective, but it's also from an individual perspective. We have to be able to balance both. As humans, we can balance both. Our brains allow us to do that. And we have to, in order to meet people where they are. But when we're thinking about equity, we have to think about, what's the history of this particular group? And what do they need today in order to strive and to thrive and to be successful? What are the policies that we need to put in place, the programs, all of the things that we need to do to ensure that they are being that they are successful, they're being treated fairly, and that they're thriving. I often think about two things right now. I think about many organizations are implementing menopause benefits, benefit analysis. And if you kind of throw equity out the window, then you're not thinking about things like menopause benefits. And I think that that's brilliant. I think menopause benefits are a brilliant way to show people that they belong, that they are included, and that they're valuable. And so you're kind of saying that those things don't matter. I also think about paternity or parental leave. I think about families who are given leave after a child is born. I think about, more and more organizations are also providing leave with adoption. I think about IVF benefits. All of those things are you're saying don't matter when you de-emphasize and deprioritize equity. And I don't know that people understand that. You're saying veterans benefits don't matter, and they absolutely do. If you have a disability, you're saying that the policies and the benefits don't matter. And I think it's a step in the wrong direction. And I had such high hopes for SHRM and all the things that they could do and how they could stand out as a leader, that really this is disappointing. So there are two things that I think we can do to achieve equity. One is to spot current inequities. There are a lot of really great tools available. Many of them are free that you can access, on the internet, where you can go throughout your organization, kind of department by department, not just specifically for HR, but throughout your entire organization, and look at the inequities that may be present in policies, programs, initiatives, and their outcomes. And for many of these tools, it just kind of takes you question by question so that, you can really do the work to spot those inequities. That's a great short-term way to really understand and to see and to point out those inequities. There's another way that I think is more long-term, that's more sustainable. And really, once you have it, no one can take it away from you. And that's building that lens of equity. And really, it's building a lens of DEI, because they all go together. Building that lens of equity helps you seek and spot and prevent future inequities. So if you're creating a new process, you're creating a new program, you will be able to sense, as you're creating that program, where there might be moments in that process that inequities could come into play. If there are specific requirements, if you have to pay money, if you have to have a certain amount of time invested, there are certain cues that you will get along the way that will let you know, hey, this, because of the knowledge that I have about, processes and systems and how it impacts various groups of people, this might be a place where we do some extra work to ensure that we are not creating a process, a program, or a policy that hurts people, even if it's unintentional, right? So it allows you to build that lens of equity where you pause and you can say, wait a minute, this looks familiar to me because I've done the work on myself, and I have a better understanding. I'm not an expert. I don't try to be, but I do know enough to know that we need to be extra cautious as we are going about this to ensure that we are preventing any future inequities. And you may not catch them all, like we're not going to be perfect in everything that we do, but is there an opportunity to reduce the hurt as much as possible? And then, being open when we're doing those annual or biannual audits to spotting those inequities and correcting them with some urgency. So, two things that I think we can do to keep doing this work. But where do we go from here? And couple of things. One, I sincerely hope that SHRM retracts their statement and And I could see it going something like, we hear you. Perhaps we did not do enough information gathering from our stakeholders, meaning the members, and forming an opinion and a decision about how we move forward. And I sincerely hope that they then go back in time and say, let's do this all over again, and let's do it differently. And instead of them saying we're going to de-emphasize equity, I would love for them to say we're going to really spend some time figuring out how to make DEI work better. Because I think we can all agree that there are some organizations that are doing DEI and are not doing a very good job. I think we knew that, because they started perhaps in 2020 and it just never felt authentic. And now we're kind of facing the repercussions of that across the board. So I think SHRM could say, let's figure out how to move forward in a way that does not de-emphasize what we're currently attempting to do, but helps us be more effective and efficient in doing it. But here's what you can do as a practitioner, as a leader, as an influencer within your sphere of, the organization. Here's what you can do. I challenge you to look at your organization's current, efforts, your DEI initiatives. What are you doing today? Are you achieving the things that you set out to achieve? Are you checking the box on the things that you wanted to get done? If you said you wanted to create a workplace that was more inclusive and equitable for women, if you go through and look at all the initiatives and efforts and policies and programs that you have in place, are they helping women? Are they hurting women? Or are women the same as where they've always been within your organization? If you're not achieving the goal that you want to achieve, then you've got to pivot. And it's okay to pivot. It's okay to say the strategies that we've employed perhaps aren't working. The goal remains the same, but how we get there, maybe we need to do differently. And it's okay to pivot. What I often find is that if you have a goal to positively impact a specific group of people, for instance, women, perhaps the reason why you're not getting the traction that you want is because you're only focusing on the most privileged group of women. You're not thinking about the intersections of women, women of color, women of a particular age, women of a particular, sexual orientation, women who have a disability, women who English is not their first language. You're not thinking about women at the intersection of multiple identities, and therefore the solutions that you're implementing aren't reaching the women that you need to reach. So that could be a way to pivot. The other thing that I would recommend is where are you doing exactly what you said you wanted to do? What parts of the strategy, of the effort are working as intended? And amplify those things. Blow them up. Do more of them. Get more people involved and on board and engaged with the things that are working, and fine tune them where you should, so that they continue to be sustainable and effective. I think by doing those two things, we can continue doing this work and doing it in a way that makes the most sense. Again, I'm disappointed in SHRM. I'm disappointed in what they have put out and the fact that this is the steps that they're taking. And I hope that they reconsider. But in the meantime, I am challenging you to stay on board, continue doing the work, because DEI is a cycle. We can look back in history and see this, where there have been moments where people are intensely focused on DEI in whatever iteration that may look like, whether it's the civil rights movement, DEI, whatever the case may be. There's a focus on people and fairness, equality, equity, inclusion, all of that. We're going to come back to this. A lot of organizations are, getting off of the train but they're going to come back because that's what happens. There's going to be something that moves society forward, and companies are going to jump back on the bandwagon again. And here's what you don't want. You don't want your organization to get off of the train now and then get back on the train in however many years it's going to take for us to get through this cycle. Because the time lapse, not only will the things that you've implemented fall off, but there's going to be other things that come up, and it's going to take you forever to get caught up again. You individually, same thing. If this is not a part of just who you are and how you operate and how you show up as a leader, you're going to be behind when the next cycle comes up again. And for me, this is a continuous thing. Like there are no cycles in my world because this is what I live day in and day out. But for those who are getting off of the train right now, they are going to find it harder to get back on in the future. They're going to find that folks will remember this. They will remember organizations that are on the wrong side of history. And when they try to get back on the right side of history, there's going to have to be a reckoning that comes with that. You don't just get to say, oh, okay, we're ready to do the work again now without having to explain why you stopped doing the work however many years ago. You don't want to do that. I promise you, you don't want to do that. It's easier to continue doing the work. You're doing it in some way, shape, or form. You're doing inclusion in some way, shape, or form already. You're doing equity in some way, shape, or form already. The question is, are you going to continue doing it in a way that is intentional and that is strategic? That's the question. And I hope the answer is yes. So feel free to get your free copy of the Table of Diversity at tableofdiversity.com. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. But in the meantime, SHRM, get it together. We do better. We're expecting you to. If you want to maintain that title as a leader within the industry, you have to. This is Demetria Miles McDonald with Decide Diversity, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.